Hello everybody, welcome to episode 132 of Show For You, which now I'll be going over the Dragon Ball Z movie, The Tree of Might. Now, this movie starts off with us seeing as a large explosion with a satellite thing lands down in the woods and somewhere near where Krillin, Bulma, and Gohan and Oolong are camping. I know, an odd crew there, but yeah, so we see as this lands and it causes a massive fire, and this causes a lot of the forest to burn down. Some animals die and stuff like that. And ultimately, Krillin and Gohan are tasked with putting out the fire, which they ultimately do. But after this, they're like, oh crap, that all kind of sucks. And ultimately, Gohan ends up running to this little dinosaur, which we come to know as Icarus, and he ends up naming it Icarus. And this little guy is like a recurring character in non canonical Dragon Ball sources. But yeah, so we see this, and ultimately they're like, yeah, we can restore this forest, so let's go get the Dragon Balls. So they ultimately go and collect all the Dragon Balls, and we see that as they summon Shinron, we see as Icarus is kind of scared of him, and we also see that Oolong is as well, but ultimately they end up wishing, and they restore the forest. Now, we get a perspective out in space where we see as, like, this group of what appeared to be Frieza Force soldiers are talking about how this appears to be a suitable land to grow something known as the Tree of Might. And we see as they have some nefarious background shadow leader at the moment. Yeah, so we see as just kind of Icarus is introduced to the Sun family. We see Chi Chi doesn't really want him, but Goku's okay with Gohan having him. So we see they kind of talk and all that, and ultimately this kind of progresses along. It's not much of importance, just kind of them dealing with Icarus and building a relationship with Icarus. But yeah, so we then see as one day Yamcha's flying around his new whip that he got to impress Bulma, and he's flying around, and then ultimately we see then as this force of Frieza Force looking soldiers ends up landing on Earth, and they have come to plant the Tree of Might. So what one of them has done is he's blasted a massive hole, like a massive chasm into the earth, and in this blast Yamcha's car is caught up and ultimately knocked out of the sky, destroying it. So then we see as Yamcha goes to the Son family's house, and they talk about it. He's like, yeah, my car got blasted out of the sky and all of that. And then ultimately they end up throwing the tree in the tree seed in there back to the Frieza Force soldiers, and with this it ends up sprouting. Now the Tree of Might, how it works is it is a massive tree which produces the fruit of the Tree of Might, and when you eat the fruit of the Tree of Might, you get an insane power up, like very high power. And how it does this is it absorbs energy throughout all the world, kind of like a spirit bomb, except it does it forcefully. It goes and it absorbs so much energy throughout, and ultimately until there's nothing left for it to suck out of the world. And so we see as it starts sprouting massive roots growing everywhere, taking over the land and everything. We see the cities are destroyed by it and all of that. And then ultimately Goku walks outside after this meal, and he gets a transmission from King Kai. And with this, King Kai tells him, yo, the Tree of Might has appeared, and you need to go destroy it because it's going to destroy the world, and it's going to sap all of its energy and all that. So ultimately, the Z Fighters, without Vegeta, end up pulling up on the Tree of Might, where they begin to all shoot with energy blast and everything, but the Tree of Might is not even injured by this. It all just destroys the area around it rather than the Tree of Might, not even putting a dent in it. So then we see as ultimately after this, they kind of try and decide what they're going to do with it, but then the Frieza Force-looking soldiers pull up, and they start whooping. So we see as they start to fight, and ultimately all the Z fighters are beat pretty handedly. Like, it's not really a beat down necessarily, but they're beat pretty easily. And we see ultimately as Gohan ends up pulling up here after having looked for Icarus, and because Icarus did come to the house while they were having like that dinner, but Gohan did not end up going with him. He kind of shoot Icarus off, and then he went back to his cave and looked for him, but he couldn't find him. So we see Gohan's kind of flying around until ultimately someone's eye is caught by Gohan. It is Turles. Turles is the main antagonist of this movie, and he is like essentially a Goku clone, but he has honestly a really cool design. He has black Saiyan armor, kind of like grayish black ashen skin. Like, it's still skin looking, but like it's weird. It's really weird. He's got a red scouter tail around his waist and all that. So yeah, he's just a really cool looking Saiyan armor. Not Saiyan armor, but Frieza Force armor. Saiyan. And so we see as he ends up noticing Gohan, and he's like, yo, this kid is super powerful. Could he be a Saiyan? And he's like, oh, yes, it must be Kakarot's kid. So he ends up going, messing with Gohan, and ultimately he ends up beating him pretty soundly. And then at one point he attempts to shoot Gohan with a beam blast, and Piccolo shows up and kind of helps save Gohan when ultimately he's hit with that blast for covering for Gohan, and then Gohan ends up like, yo, Piccolo, thanks for saving me, but Piccolo ends up falling to the ground, and then Gohan's ultimately recaptured by Turles. And since Turles knows he's a Saiyan, what he ends up doing is he ends up forcing the growth of Gohan's tail. And with this, he ends up like doing a really cool, like, fast-paced spin of Gohan raising his head up, and shooting one of those moon blasts Vegeta has into the sky, where Gohan sees it and he starts rampaging in his Uzaru form. And we see as Goku's trying to handle him, trying to calm him down, but obviously he's in Uzaru, so he doesn't really know what's going on. And he's just rampaging around, destroying, until ultimately he ends up falling the massive chasm where the Tree of Might is planted, essentially. And we hear Piccolo, before this happens, telling Goku that he needs to remove Gohan's tail to get him back into his normal form, because Piccolo knows this because of their training prior to the attack of the... Well, I would presume this is before Vegeta and Nappa show up, so I guess it's sometime briefly. It can't be. I really don't know how this is placed in the timeline, but we're just gonna presume that Piccolo somehow figured out that you got to remove the tail. But he actually learns that you have to remove the tail. And crap, I don't remember exactly when that happened. I believe it was when he was training with Gohan after the defeat of Raditz. Yeah, so they end up falling in this chasm, and Goku ends up having to deal with it a little bit longer, but then Icarus ends up coming in, and we see as the Uzaru inside Gohan is tamed by Icarus, and ultimately they end up chilling and all that. We see as Goku scolds Turles a bit as he pulls up down here, and then ultimately Turles hits him. Goku asks Turles, "Do you know the difference between good and evil?" And Turles is like, "Yes, I know the difference between good and evil. The thing is, I just don't care." And he sends a blast down at Icarus, blasts him away. Uzaru Gohan ends up chasing after him and getting mad and releasing a blast. We see as Goku has to fight with him more, but then Turles ends up preparing a blast to ultimately obliterate Gohan, essentially. But Goku ultimately ends up using a key blade to, not a key blade, but a key blast, almost like a Destructo Disc, to cut off Uzaru Gohan's tail, which then leads to Gohan transforming and being safe. Well, ultimately Goku goes and holds him, and he's like, "Yo, are you okay?" And Goku says something about a monkey, not a monkey, but a large ape, rampaging around and all that, which was him. So he has some memory of his Uzaru form transformation. But yeah, so we then see as the fight between Goku and Turles commences, and it's going pretty bad for Goku from the get-go. But then, ultimately, they end up going through this chasm a little bit further, and where Turles grabs the fruit of the Tree of Might. And he ends up popping a bite in, and the beatdown gets even crazier from here. He ends up whooping Goku. Goku's essentially on the ground, almost unconscious. And here we see as Turles is preparing to ultimately destroy the world, because he has no reason for it now that he has the fruit of the Tree of Might. And so we see then as Goku is laying there, and when he starts to hear the voices of the Z Fighters, they're like, "Yo, you gotta get up, Goku, you gotta fight." So we see then as some of the Z Fighters ultimately get up, and they try and distract Turles while Goku builds up a spirit bomb, essentially. And so he's building this up, and they're fighting. And ultimately, Turles, 4v1s them? Yeah, he 4v1s them, because it's Piccolo, Krillin. No, Yamcha's there, so 5v1s them. And yeah, he ends up beating all of them, and then Goku ends up shooting his spirit bomb at Turles, but Turles is quick enough to react and hits a blast of it itself back at Goku. And ultimately, after this, Goku is essentially out for the count. And then Turles once again prepares to commence with his destruction. But during this, we see as a kind of a panning around of the Tree of Might, we get to see how more and more of the world's energy is getting drained by the Tree of Might as more of the fruit grow. And we see as Goku is kind of desiring to actually get the... Well, actually see as Krillin has an inner monologue briefly about how if Goku could get the fruit of the Tree of Might, then he would be okay. But ultimately, Goku ends up, essentially getting back up, and he's like, "Yo, I have nature's power on my side." And we see as he's laying on the ground, he holds his hand up when he's looking at the sun, and then ultimately he ends up getting up and he's like, "I have nature's power on my side." And then he ends up throwing what appears to be a spirit bomb at Turles, and this one is far more powerful than the previous one. Turles doesn't have much time to react, and it hits him, and it goes into him, obliterates him essentially. Also, I forgot to mention how before Goku actually started fighting all of them, he did fight the goons, but he ended up vaporizing most of them. So yeah. But back to the thing at hand. But yeah, so he ends up essentially destroying all of the Tree of Might, destroying Turles, and everything's blown up. Now, at first, I presume this was possibly a spirit bomb from the sun, because I know this can happen because I recently reread parts of the Saiyan Saga. But it would be kind of odd, so I didn't really know how to take this. But ultimately, everything ends up turning back to normal as the Tree of Might returns its nutrients, which it once held and sapped from the world, to all of the people, animals, trees, and all that. So all of them start to revive and all of that, get healed up. and then everything is a-okay. And we see then as King Kai kind of explains what Goku did. And so what Goku had done is he absorbed the pure energy from the Tree of Might to create a very powerful spirit bomb, because the Tree of Might had all of Earth's energy within it. So Goku really just sapped that out and then redirected it into a spirit bomb to destroy Turles and the Tree of Might. So yeah, then we kind of see as, once again, another camping trip goes between Gohan, Bulma, and Oolong and all of them. And that's where the movie ends. So yeah. That movie was honestly really enjoyable. I liked Turles' design because honestly it reminded me kind of like a Dark Link design, because it was essentially just a dark Goku, and I just liked his like character design like immensely. Like, this movie wasn't anything too crazy, too in depth like lore wise, but it was just a really cool, enjoyable movie. It had a nice fight. I like to see that Goku got the beat down on him pretty bad. He only kind of pulled it away from a kind of bogus pull, but I mean still though. But yeah, like I said, that's all there really was for it, and that's all I really have for episode 132 of Show Review. So thank you very much for watching.